Hello, everybody. Welcome to my name is Bogus Hangout. I'm gonna have our guests introduce themselves. Sarah, would you please start us?
Hi, I'm Sarah Altier, and I write for the web. And I am very allergy sniffly today, so excuse the sniffles.
I am too. Steve, will you go next?
Steve Grinter with Steam Driven Media and Web Narwhal now.
Thomas,
Thomas Sickle, founder of Blueprint Marketing and MTI Polyx Corporation.
Terry,
Terry Van Horn, retired, living in Toronto. The good life.
Doc,
Doc Sheldon of Intrinsic Value SEO and also Web Narwhal.
and I'm Bill Slosky of SEO by the Sea and Director of SEO Research for Go Fish Digital. So, what's good news today, everyone? Anything?
There's not much good news these days. Well, they haven't locked down yet. That's the good news.
Yeah.
Children are.
That's
Children
only a few months away, though. I can feel it.
They said the first couple weeks in November, children 5 through 12 will be able to get a COVID shot.
Yeah.
So, what's this news I hear about Google and AMP?
Yeah,
Google seemed
Yeah.
AMP crazy for the past couple of years.
promoting it over.
There's some nefarious plot behind that.
Apparently so. So there are two ways of doing, PPC auctions as far as, how do you bid, whatever. And a group was getting together to where you could buy header ads, basically, which basically means you were buying from everybody at the same time. And in an effort to stall that, those don't work with AMP pages at all. So Google went batshit crazy. Everybody needs to be on AMP, and it effectively killed this new way of doing pay-per-click ads, and left Google as the sole arbiter.
They would also add a little bit more to the price if it was a non-AMP ad. Is that, if I'm correct?
Yeah. They have a habit of adding a little bit more to the ad price regardless these days, and we think I've got it figured out what they're doing, which is not cool, but it's one of those. We've had clients where an average click might be $12 on a consistent basis, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but $12. And then all of a sudden, that exact same click costs $200 for no reason.
Yep.
So would Google have
then the
gotten
next
away
day
with
it's
it
back
without
$12.
those meddling kids?
I think that if they hadn't been outed with all of the Facebook stuff that's coming out these days, I don't think anybody would have known about this. But I'm hopeful, but not confident that we will see some changes.
Also, those headers, they were delaying them, which is even worse.
A 1 second delay in some cases.
Doesn't matter how much of a delay it is, not something you're allowed to screw with. By rights, it's not right. At least ethically, if not lawfully. And I think lawfully is going to be determined real soon.
I agree. I think that I don't know the legal parameters of it, but I know ethically that people purchasing Google ads will probably not be able to.
Well, you
stop
shouldn't
buying.
be messing in another website's headers, period. Period. That's hacking, bud.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. Just to do exactly what you guys said before, that they're doing with Facebook, enriching themselves through taking advantage of people online because of their size is amazing.
If you look at, too, the fact that they made Discover and some of the big features that were drawing a lot of traffic only to AMP pages, I'm betting they got
Like
into
top
this,
stories.
and that's why they stopped it.
Yeah, for a while, top stories were only AMP.
Yeah.
And then Danny Sullivan
Yep.
showed up on Twitter and said, okay, you can do any type of stories, not just news stories and not just AMP stories. And have
Was
them as
it
top stories.
Discover also?
It may have been.
Okay, I believe it was as well. Discover and Top Stories were both at one time just on AMP.
Well, of course, I would imagine that Google's response, when you talk about they shouldn't be messing with somebody else's site, their response would likely be, yeah, but if it's on AMP, it's not your site, it's ours.
Yeah, they've been pushing the traffic.
That doesn't. Okay, that would be.
It's not a winner of an
I don't want
argument.
to argue about it, but I think that will be decided in a court.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not saying it's correct. I'm just saying that I suspect that would be their response. When you decided to use AMP, you gave up ownership of the content.
It's not a very good. It's a loser argument.
Yeah. It's a loser argument unless, of course, they're willing to throw 9 figures behind their legal team to starve you out, which is their typical approach.
Right.
Yeah, Google doing evil since 1999.
Just ask TerraVision.
I
Terrorism.
put that on Twitter today. Didn't get any retweets. I thought it might.
So there's a lot of other news, but I'm having trouble reading. So Black Hat SEO works unless it doesn't.
For a while.
That's the way it's always worked.
I agree. It definitely is something that's been around for forever, and it just works until the website gets manually penalized, and then it goes away. It's not a worthwhile thing. But
I did SEO in a category of sites where most of my competition was Black Hat, and a lot of them were using cloaking to make sales, and we were just using plain, straightforward, organic SEO. We didn't get we didn't lose out too much. I think
It
we were
really
actually
does
making
depend on
pretty good sales.
It depends so much on the niche you're in, because some niches are predominantly Black Hat.
Yeah,
And if you don't compete at that level, you're not going to succeed.
You're not in the game, no.
Payday loans, I told them, don't even bother with SEO, just do PPC. It'll be cheaper than trying to pay me to come with leaders.
I think
and actual results.
And if you're going to do it long term, right? So what you're actually doing is building up a presence on the web for your company, not actually trying to rank. So social media probably helped tons with that in that category.
Yeah, because I don't think Payday Loans is available to pay-per-click. I know there's a handful.
I did it for 2 years. It was the most lucrative thing I've ever looked at.
Yeah, the interest rates are
only $2 a piece then too.
The only time I actually got into PPC was for a penny auction site. And they were a pretty major player in that niche. And there's no way in the world you could compete without doing Black Hat. So I told them the same thing. In fact, I think it was in the dojo that you mentioned one time that the only way you're going to compete in that kind of a niche is with PPC. And the guys were already thinking that. They threw 6 figures a month at it and ruled. But, yeah, it's a long game.
Yeah, if you're really smart, you just go the content network to stay right off of Google. And it's the guys that are partners of Google. Google and its partners, in my opinion, are the worst place to run ads. Use the content network and research the hell out of it, right, Steve?
Yeah.
So Google went through one of its quality guideline updates recently. Has anybody looked through those yet?
I very seldom read those, but I always read Jennifer Slake's outline on it. We don't need anything that's
Well, her update has come out, so
Yeah,
I
I
haven't
read
had a
it
chance
this
to read that
morning.
yet.
I read
Yeah,
it.
she always does a good job on those.
You know, you can
Anything
see
anything
the
stick out to you?
since the Floyd murder are reflected in that as far as how they refer to people and whatnot. It's a lot more PC is how I would describe it.
Would you recommend other people read it?
Yeah, there's always good. Like some people say, oh, it doesn't really reflect the algos. It says what Google's telling their people to look for, which means that's what you should be doing. You know, I didn't have any trouble understanding the EAT principles after reading the guidelines that come out just before that update. They basically said, in fact, when that update come out, I had already added author bylines, an author's box, and a bio page to the main website I was working on, seeing that was what was important for it.
That seems to be one of the biggest changes that they're looking for.
Well, you can't really tell expertise. The only way they can really tell expertise is by links and mentions.
And what you
even
tell
that.
them.
You know, by that token, though, Webmaster T, then Donald Trump is got real expertise because he gets a hell of a lot of mentions, right? So, you know, I think it has to go a little bit deeper than that. But
Well,
you know, there's no way in the world that an algo cannot reliably determine that one of us has more expertise than the other.
Can't.
There may be some indicators, but you know, it's one in a one shot out of 100 that they're going to hit the mark. So
what they want to do is make it easy for users to look at it and determine if that's what they call expertise, if that's what they want to believe in, right? Because the user knows what they believe in.
So there's certain signs that will potentially tell a visitor to a site whether or not somebody's an expert.
Yeah. Also, the date. Like, to me, this is becoming a bigger issue than actually just what Google's doing with EAT. It's also when people come to your website now. If I see a website article from 2010, if it's referred by, say, Bill, I'll go and see it because he thinks it's something that people may be interested. It relates to what's going on today. Whereas if it's Joe Schmo who had, you know, SEO expert at, you know, SEOexpert.com, I'm going to say, you know, 2010, no thanks, unless I know the author who wrote it. But I think those having a date on a website is on a post is important.
I agree with that, but you know, I do think I have a problem with all the folks that jump on the argument that you cannot put any stock in the Quality Rater's Guide because there aren't ranking factors. Well, I'm sorry. No, there may not be ranking factors, but they are an indicator of what Google thinks its algorithm should be showing. If that doesn't mean anything to you, Jack in the Box is hiring, you know?
Yeah,
I don't chase algos, I chase the algo's intent.
That goes back to the old Wayne Gretzky quote, skate to where the puck is going to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because basically the raters' guides are them rating what happens in a space when they change something. So they want the raters to look at it in this specific way for a reason.
Well, plus the fact that
users are interested in.
And there's real value in the fact that the users, the raters that they're using are not, they're not search engineers. They don't have a biased viewpoint. They're looking at things as a user, which is a lot more realistic feedback than they're going to get from one of their guys on the engineering team going to say, "Yep, that's what I had in mind." Now it's like trying to edit your own copy. The lawyer is defending himself. You got a fool for a client.
I think as it progresses, it'll get a lot more intelligent, and maybe you learn from trusted sites where to find citations or mentions of people. Like if it's a trusted newspaper or something like that, that might count a little bit more in the algorithm.
Wait a minute, Thomas. Trusted newspaper? What planet are you from?
Yeah, there is no
he's not from Trump world.
They may be
not from
trusted
Trump
off.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a thread the other day on Facebook. Somebody asked, "What publications do you trust most?" And it was kind of ironic that to me it was BBC and Al Jazeera.
BBC.
Those are the two least biased, or the most fair in their representation of a story is Al Jazeera and BBC. But they are, in my mind at least.
Yeah.
I haven't checked out Al Jazeera, but BBC is definitely very middle of the
Al
road.
Jazeera is worth a look. They really are. They do present a pretty even-handed reporting on most international stories.
Yeah, that's something I'll have to check out. I try to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post and New York Times to get a balanced view, but it's a lot of reading from different perspectives.
Yeah, I live near Washington, D.C., and the Washington Post was the main local paper. And after a year or so reading through that every day, I've given up on the fact of placing too much trust in what they write.
Yeah, they're pretty biased.
It's all politicized.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was just a channel that said this happened on this day. And
Well, that's because of the people reading it are also the same way. They don't want to hear what the other side's thinking. They only want to hear that they're right.
I grew up in Jersey, and my parents got two different newspapers, and I'd read them both each day, and I'd look at the stories that were the same in each newspaper and how different they were. Because they had lots of differences sometimes.
I really, in my day, I really do miss the news reporting style of folks like Huntley Brinkley, where you got the story and the facts, and they told you what was not necessarily a fact, but supposition or a probability, but they gave you an honest reporting. And it's been a long time.
They were journalists. They were real journalists. Doc. These people now are talking heads. They're not journalists. They're talking heads.
And occasionally some conscientious journalist will attempt to be a real journalist, and they find themselves on the street looking for a new job because they're not bringing in the readers. They're bringing,
I think the internet's what destroyed it.
Well, the internet has certainly destroyed it in part, but it's also our response to things. Because, if the newspaper that our parents read suddenly puts forth a story that we don't agree with, we're not content to simply look for another paper. Now we got to start attacking them, tearing them down, bad-mouthing them. It's just we overreact on everything so much. Between political parties and media and neighbors and
I think to some degree the world has changed. Because I remember reporters like Roseanne Scamardello from Channel 7 in New York City, side by side with news journalist Geraldo Rivera reporting. And they would show up sometimes with black eyes because a landlord had punched them out when they were covering the story about somebody who got evicted from an apartment. And you don't see too many more black eyes, and you see people like Geraldo Rivera covering somebody's unveiling of their vault.
Al Capone empty vault.
Yeah. So the world's changed. The news sources have changed. And those reporters were spoofed on Saturday Night Live. You know, Rosanna Dana was Roseanne Scamardello. And they were mocked more than anything else. And then you had politics showing news as alternative facts or fake news.
Yeah.
So the politicians were running away from the news by making fun of it. And it wasn't necessarily fake news. It was news that a politician in power didn't like.
But it's become the norm rather than the exception now. So everybody is so used to it.
The problem is that fake news is a thing. And there are plenty of instances when you can point to those things and say, was it NBC who added explosives to a pickup truck so that it would blow up when you hit it from the side to demonstrate that it was unsafe? And it's like, you could have done this whole, because they've done multiple impacts, and yes, the fuel tanks ruptured, and yes, there were fuel leaks, but none of them exploded. So the one they used on the news was the one they rigged to explode. Or the times you got CNN claiming to be in Kuwait, but they're really on a soundstage standing next to a potted tree, pretending they're in Kuwait.
Or the dozen anchors at Fox News saying that vaccination mandates shouldn't happen when everybody who works at Fox is required to get a vaccine.
And you see, who was it? I don't know I don't remember which one it was, but they were doing this, the reporters in the field, and they were each in a parking lot. But what they had done is reversed where they were sitting in the camera, and you could see them. There was a pickup truck that went through on this side, and then immediately went through on this side on the other one. And it's like, these two people are sitting next to each other, and you're pretending like they're both in remote locations. So when your news agencies have a habit of doing stupid shit like this, it makes it really easy to say what they're saying is fake. Because they've already proven they will fake the news to fit their story. Now, that doesn't mean all the news is fake, but it sure does make it easier to claim it is.
But it sure becomes very difficult, too, to tell which is and which isn't.
Right.
Especially if you're not one that is inclined to employ any critical thinking skills. You'd rather listen and follow, which there's an awful lot of folks out there like that.
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking requires time. And that's something that's in short supply these days.
But the lack of critical thinking costs you time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you have to employ critical thinking to understand that, Bill. There's the rub.
They have to have the processing power again to do it as well. So sometimes their critical thinking, rather whatever they call it, is not so exact. Not everyone's is the same.
You can be named the #1 influencer of all time everywhere and be the biggest bullshit artist in existence.
Right.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I resemble that remark.
There are few people who do.
Google is saying now that links are not the biggest ranking factor, or not as big of a ranking factor.
Have they been?
Would be.
Anytime?
There's certain niches where links are definitely not a ranking factor at all, like news or social news. Like somebody types in Twitter earthquake, and then that's followed up by 24 other people saying, yeah, I felt it too. If it's near me, I'm going to be concerned. It's not that those have lots of links to them. It's that they're timely.
Yeah.
Same with news. You don't look for the story with the most links to it. You look for the story that might affect you the most.
Yeah, the one that you have most interest in, or yeah.
The one that you just heard about.
Yep.
Well, yeah, the one that's closest or the timeliest or that affects your recent searches or areas of interest. I mean, there's a lot of different things that can come into play there.
Right. And links.
And like
links
you
are
say,
in.
for news, what good are links? Yeah.
Yeah.
Google could be looking at quality of sites too, quality scores, etc. as well.
One can only hope.
When Google News rankings first came out, they were looking at the quality of the sources. They were looking at things that looked like they were effective news agencies, like they had bureaus in multiple countries and other things, and they've backed away from that. They updated the news ranking algorithm 4 times with 4 continuation patents, and each one had less things dealing with news agencies as much as possible. Right now they're up to.
They weren't remote anyways.
Right now they're looking for stories that mention lots of entities. The more entities they mention, the higher ranking the news story would be.
Entity-rich news. Okay.
Think about people, places, and things in stories.
Makes sense. I mean, that's what pays the bills there.
Well, it's like the
Yeah,
width
but
of
that's not
the
good
width of
reporting.
coverage. There's another source-based ranking they were looking at was number of subscribers to a news source, which sort of prejudiced people against smaller agencies and towards worldwide large agencies like a New York Times.
Yeah, that I mean, I'm guilty of that myself, of going with the story from bigger newspaper than the smaller one.
Yeah.
I hope
So
that they
the
would employ more facts.
Sheboygan Times isn't as effective as the New York Times?
They might have the same information or better information, but I guess I'm not I don't mean to be biased, but I definitely choose the New York Times over them.
There's some implied credibility. You know, either having a large subscriber list or having a broader circulation or more years of history. But we're seeing over the last couple of decades that may not be a reliable bias.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, I've seen a lot of news stories break and have the actual real source be something I've never heard of, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, I'm sure that the actual best news is scattered amongst different newspapers all the time and then just regurgitated by the big ones.
So the time is right at least twice a day on a broken clock.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I resemble that remark.
But that's a big deal, though, for Google not to come out and say that links are not as big of a factor for some sites, because for a long time they've kind of been one of the defining sources.
The time is 3:30 p.m.
Hey,
Let's
Google,
go
stop.
grab a glass of water.
So sorry.
You go wash your hands.
I've got to make that thing stop.
What
There-
is,
there-
what
there's
is
some
Thomas?
there's some types of news where links have never been important, like local news.
Yeah.
A
Proximity.
citation
Yeah.
doesn't have to be a link. A link can be a citation, but a citation doesn't have to be a link.
Right.
And
Right.
citations are more important for local news. And
Absolutely.
it may still be.
Yeah. If Google knows where you are by your IP or your phone GPS or whatever system,
More
it will-
important for the local pack as well, if you're trying to get your business listed.
same thing there. Yeah.
So one thing I was reading this morning was over at SEO Roundtable, they finally have said, well, maybe what we think are updates is just the new normal, basically, which something I've been saying for a long time. That,
Yeah.
you know, things are changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
There is, you know, what looks like an update is just normal. So get used to it, folks.
Yeah.
Put your big boy panties on and let's go.
So I've got a presentation tomorrow, and it's called Google in Real Life. Where I'm talking about Googlebot not being necessarily something that we envision crawling websites and crawling links, but guiding us like you have Google News on your phone, which has GPS activated signal that goes to Google that lets them know you're at a restaurant, which may lead to that restaurant being more popular if lots of people go to the same restaurant. Because Google's actual presence there on your phone, in your wallet, as per GPS, tells Google that it's a popular restaurant.
Yep.
And that's going to lead to it being recommended more often.
Yeah. If you look at the data that SEM Rush provided, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that's a little telling about all the flux is a lot of it's much higher on mobile than it is on desktop. And I
That makes
believe
sense.
that's because of things like Mum and the way that they construct the search differently makes the rankings much more volatile.
The
Or
primary-
it's, you know, what we used to call flux, because volatility isn't actually a real. To me, it doesn't describe what it is, because volatility says something negative usually.
Are you familiar with federated learning?
Federated learning. I've never heard of that term.
Okay, there have been a couple Google blog posts about it, but basically the idea is that when you make selections on your phone, when you choose things, when you do searches, when you browse, that information is all gathered together and sent up to Google at least once a day, where they take it, aggravate it with other information from other people's phones, and they do some machine learning to decide which are better sources for certain queries. And then they upload it back to your phone once a day after they've done that aggregation. And
Here's a question for you, Bill.
it's
Do you
machine
think
learning
that-
for devices.
Do you think that harvesting of that sort of information is or could be applied to the pricing for their ads?
Oh yeah.
You know, you go by, you come across an ad for Joe's Eats, and you click on it because they're running a special, and then 45 minutes later, you're down at Joe's Eats checking in. Is that going to drive the price, the cost per click up on their ad? Presently, it doesn't seem to, but I just see that as a potential evolution.
So there was a patent on what they referred to as quality visits. And they could follow GPS in your phone to see which stores you're going to, which shops, which other types of places. And there's one analysis program at Google, Google Analytics 360, something like that, which indicates which are the most popular places people actually visit.
Yeah,
And
360 does do that.
at one point, they were going to give out badges, local badges, to places indicating they were in the top 5% of visits. And they didn't go through with the badges part of it because that was supposed to come out last summer. It never came out.
Sort
I
of like
think
a
COVID had a problem with it.
local guide badge for yourself, but for the business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that would piss the other 95% off as well.
Probably.
Make them invest more in Google Local, probably.
Invest less.
But the fact that they were showing it in the analytics program said this is a real thing, and they could really do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think they probably go up by the price based on if the amount of people actually being sent there. If it's more popular, they'll probably raise the paper.
Google doesn't set the prices; it's an auction.
Well,
It's an
supposedly.
auction based
Per
on
se, let's put it in air quotes. Steve,
It's
an auction.
modified by quality scores. And what determines the quality score?
The
There
page.
could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going into the auctions these days than there have ever been in the past, especially as they try to push us more and more towards black box pay-per-click, where you just set up their automated tools and let them figure it out.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
What we're starting to notice, and it's hard to put real data on it because there's so much that Google hides from us, but we're starting to see changes in bid pricing or CPC pricing based on who Google thinks your audience is. So if they're just throwing out ads to fill out your budget late in the day, the cost per click may be lower than earlier in the day when they're specifically aiming at an audience that they think they've built that works for you.
That's
So,
why day
you know,
party
that-
used to be so important. Important was during the day, the cost fluctuated quite a bit.
Well,
Especially back when I was doing it, it was a big deal.
Well, and it becomes a real issue when Google can't figure out your audience because you're in a niche that their AI can't figure out. That, you know, the keywords for your niche could apply 8 different ways. I mean, I've got a third of my clients are constantly being put into special categories like housing or employment when that's not what they do. But their niche directly involves homes. So we're constantly getting thrown into special categories, which limits our exposure, which increases the pricing. Then we have to file an appeal, and the appeal could take anywhere from 24 to 72 hours. And then they've always reversed it. But then a week later, it gets thrown back in again. And it is an ongoing battle with them. And I've told many Google reps, it's like, if you can figure out a way to whitelist this stuff, you know, I will listen to anything else you have to say. But if you can't solve that one problem for me, I have no use for you. And they're like, well, all I can do is file an appeal. And it's like, well, then I have no use for you.
If your business bidding on certain actions associated with entities, you can show advertisements in knowledge panels,
Yes.
like watching a movie, streaming something, selling tickets to some event, something like that.
Probably books too.
Probably books.
Records,
Yeah, books are there.
music. Anything Google can siphon a dime off of there.
So you're bidding on an entity, but you're bidding on some action associated with that entity. So you're no
And their
longer
system
bidding
really
on a
falls apart.
phrase.
Right. Well, and their system really falls apart when you don't have a conversion metric that their tools can track. If your conversions happen offline on a phone, they can't track that, and so they're just throwing shit at the wall. You know, like I said, I've got clients where our negative keyword list is, you know, several thousand phrases long, just to try to refine it enough to where most of the ads are good. But as they keep expanding close variant and pushing, they're really on a hard push for broad match terms again.
Yeah.
There's no way our clients can run those because 60% of the ads are going to be to people who aren't who we're targeting.
Yeah, they'll put iPhone in front of anything that's on an ad if you don't make sure it's. And then it's.
Can you still do exact match, Steve?
You can, but it's not that. They will
Yeah.
still throw variants in there.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
And
that's a couple of years old.
And they will stop serving the exact match because of low search volume.
Yep.
Okay, a slight change.
So that's their excuse for adding the garbage in is, the volume's too low without that, so take it or leave it.
Hey, I get some feedback on the Hangout itself this last week. Somebody's watching Bill Neyman's Bogus Hangout, and they said they never laughed so hard. So pat yourselves on the back.
That's what I get for not wearing makeup. I have that effect on people.
We're just 6 wannabe comedians.
Right. We were 6 MCs in search of a radio show.
It's just gotten so terribly frustrating, and I'm seeing the same issue on the SEO side where we're getting traffic that's just. I mean, the real obvious part is when in Google Ads they will send you suggested audiences, who they think your audience is, and the audience category would be like pet owners, and you're selling medical equipment for elderly. It's like, how did you even come up with this? I mean, it just
Isn't that the whole theory behind the new, I don't know what the terminology is, but it's like cohort conglomeration where it's not personalized, but it's like most of the people who do this and this are like this. So then people at home can be pet owners. So it's that kind of crazy, which makes it really hard.
Yeah.
If it says it as the primary category, then that's a nightmare.
So they're building these wild, crazy profiles, personas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And basically sneaking broad match back into play again.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. It's very I think it's very frustrating because it's like it's all hidden, and so targeting isn't even a concept, as it were, because it's just a big free for all within your quote target unquote.
I will say that my favorite thing that has been happening recently with Google Ads is I've been getting calls from Google reps on my cell phone, and it shows up as a spam risk.
There's usually first line people who are trying to sell me donation chances. I don't want to donate to the New Jersey Police Department. Thanks.
Oh yeah,
you get a sticker, but
well, it's always labeled as a spam risk.
Oh yeah. Yeah, donations for a link. Oh yeah, they'll put a link to whatever. Yeah, that's definitely a huge spam risk. I mean, it was just recently that they started going after. I think they were not counting the links as much for scholarships before, but I think a site was recently manually penalized, which is strange when you think of one reason why people might actually stop using Google is if their kid isn't given money for college. If they're taking not allowing businesses to provide money for kids to go to school.
Yeah, but on a scaled
Uh,
basis, that's a pretty small risk for them. I mean, how many parents,
Very small. Yeah.
are they really going to lose, and how much is that going to hurt them as a business? Not.
Oh, 0.25%, if less. Yeah, not really very. But I guess just the idea of being against private businesses, being able to help education. I thought they would just not count the links in the algorithm that were going to go to scholarships, but instead they went after the manual penalty. In only one case that I've seen.
What do we think when Google says authors are not a ranking factor?
It's conflicting with everything else they've said. They want you to put your
not
author.
a ranking factor, it's a signal, which is different. Could be a
Well,
signal.
be careful, Terry.
For instance.
Be careful, Terry. I put forth on Search News Central probably 5 years ago the question, listing a whole bunch of things. I said, okay, let's hear in the comments. Which of these do you think are ranking factors, and which one do you think are just signals? And I got raked over the coals because, a ranking factor and a signal is exactly the same thing. And no, it isn't.
That's
So
what
I asked a question at a search engine strategies conference to a panel of search engine crawlers about ranking factors, and each of the panelists said, we don't believe in ranking factors. We have ranking signals.
Which is a reasonable response, yeah.
And I felt like I was in the land of double talk.
Well,
a ranking factor often with Google is a bunch of signals put together to come to some kind of determination.
Well, my take was more along the lines of there are some things that can affect your rankings, but only indirectly. Right. So it's not a ranking factor. It's not in the algorithm. But if you're doing this, it can indirectly help or hurt your rankings. To me, that's the difference between a ranking factor and a signal. It can be a signal, but it's not in the algorithm. Okay.
Like title can directly affect ranking, so it's a ranking factor.
Yeah. Description, no.
Directly.
Yeah.
Even more so now that Google wants to use headings as titles. Which, how much sense does that make? Because basically they're saying anyone who's using and rewriting the title in WordPress is wasting their time.
So I've seen headings used as titles since 2013. So it's not new.
No, it's been going on for a long time.
No, but it's not being used as radically as it has been now. Or to the extent it has been.
Some of the examples I've seen recently, since all the hoorah over that kicked off a couple weeks ago, were really blatant departures. They chose a heading, maybe the third heading down the page, that had nothing whatsoever to do with the search term.
Yeah, right. That's because there's query independent. That's a big thing to remember. When they're doing that, it's query independent.
Which is stupid.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the way they're doing it, Doc.
Yeah, I know. It's just it makes no sense at all.
See, maybe they know something we don't. Which one thing that's always how do I say it? Has always had me mystified is how a page can rank for 4 or 5 different terms when I only targeted one. That's why you need these rewritten titles. That's why they're doing it. So it fits all 5 queries, not just the one you were targeting.
But how does that happen when the title is a subhead? You're just randomly picking one of the other topics?
Then again, we go back to Matt Cutts talking about Starbucks. using the word home as a title, and it doesn't fit too much of anything.
Yeah, but they're
As
rewriting
Matt
it.
Cutts said, Starbucks sells coffee. So if they're not using coffee as a title for their page, they need a new CEO.
New CEO. I definitely think they need to update their site. Yeah, I think it's a terrible.
But here's the thing:
title.
they're rewriting titles just because you said cheapest ink on the net. That's rewritten because of the word cheapest.
Yeah.
Subjective terms, forget about using them in your title.
Right.
However, I say screw it. I write it to rank. I don't care how they change it. They're going to do what they're going to do. I want to know that I have control over what I'm trying to rank for. So I'm going to write a title. I really don't care.
And then we've all worked with clients who wanted pages to rank for some vanity metric that nobody in the world ever searches for.
Right.
Oh,
And
yeah.
sometimes you have to pull them aside and say, do you really want customers or not? Because you're acting like you don't.
Well,
Their
actually,
opinion
you're
of
telling them it's going to cost you X to get this when you can get this for a tenth of that and have 10 times more traffic. Guy kind of looks like stupid if he doesn't choose the better one with more traffic. Say, yeah, I can do that vanity turn, but let's put it way down the priority list. Your priorities are wrong, sir. Here's why.
We want you to make money and be successful.
Hand over fist, not stumble over it occasionally.
Have you guys seen that structured, or it's not structured data, but actual, if you Google certain e-commerce terms, it will show up with the number of products and the approximate cost in the snippet.
Yeah, it's a rich snippet.
Yeah.
But
It's a rich result.
but
It's
showing
using product
inventory,
schema.
right? But according to where I found this with the person that was doing the test, they said they didn't put the structured data of how many products they had, which is strange. In inventory.
Yeah, but if they did it, said price colon and a price inventory colon and the amount of stuff they had, they would catch that as well. Doesn't have to be in structured data. It's got to be in, what do we call it? Tab data.
No, yeah, it makes sense that it would grab it from anywhere on the page that it could. Makes complete
Or
sense.
name value pairs. That's another one. Or excuse me, entity value pair. Whatever
And
you want.
there's some points of search devices that are sending that information up to the web independently.
Yeah, that very possible.
And it's capturing stuff that you don't necessarily show on your web page. Like if you sell a certain type of candy bar and it's captured on the point of service device, that may get sent up online too.
Yep. Yeah.
And it may indicate that you're selling those.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I mean, it just shows how deep Google is into everything. It's pretty impressive.
No, it's useful that they're trying.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to know if a store has 2 left of something or if it has 100. If you're looking to buy it right away.
Right. I've gone to gas station convenience shops that include inventory that's never listed on the website. And you never know it was available there.
Yeah, just sort of you look and see something that you wouldn't expect, or it's just not listed in their normal purchases. I think most gas station convenience shops are somewhat regional in terms of what they provide in some cases, and the owners can. But yeah, I think it's I know when Apple came out with their new MacBook Pro, I was trying to order one quickly, and they didn't show inventory, but Best Buy did, or they showed how many they could sell before how many they had on order. Sorry, so that was a lot quicker. So instead of waiting, buying it directly through Apple, you get to buy it through Best Buy because they gave more data.
I was surprised at a local liquor store that sold British candies. And they had to deal with the vendor who would stop by their shop every month and sell them more, and they'd put them on their shelves. And the owner was from outside the U.S. originally, and he wanted to have the candies, so he sold them.
Makes sense, yeah. British candy is pretty good too, so
yeah. So you could buy your vodka and you could buy your candy bars all at the same time.
The Google's not classifying websites by technology, like by their CMS or anything. That I've always thought was true. But I guess some people assume Shopify e-commerce or Magento e-commerce and other things for blogs.
Why would they even think that Google would do that?
I don't know.
That's what I think too. Why would you equate that with ranking?
Why would you be advertised that when you're looking for a job? You're looking for an SEO job, and you're being told that if you provide charitable work for e-commerce sites, you work for a charity, you need to have experience with certain technologies.
Really? That's something Google put out there?
No, it's something that companies have put out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it's strange.
But why would Google care what technology you're running on?
I think they only care if the server can take the bot to be the speed of the bot to crawl it, and then the ability to the content. That's it. And the only technical thing that Google really, cares about that's platform.
I think they have two questions: is this crawlable or not? And that's the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's always
it all goes on at the other end.
Well, they did say when you change your IP, they do a test crawl to see if it can be crawled faster or slower based on the server's ability. But
Google also doesn't care what extension you're using. It doesn't have to recognize the extension on the page in order to parse it.
Oh, of course.
If it renders in HTML, it'll crawl.
Yeah.
It doesn't care what the
it could have happy birthday on it.
Is.
Yeah. I agree completely.
Well, I've seen it.
Yeah, it's strange that Google would actually come out and say this, that people were thinking that the platform classified what type of...
Usually Google doesn't come out and say stuff like that. Usually somebody asks on a webmaster forum, and Google says, no, we can't say that Google does that.
No.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
And then you see a Search Engine Roundtable story where Barry writes, John Mueller says that Google doesn't care which platform you use. Sorry, Barry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I completely agree. I'm just surprised that anyone would ever think that would. There are differences in platforms, good or bad, but why Google would care is amazing to think about.
Well, it comes down to critical thinking. Did the person think through, like, why would Google care? Right? As soon as you ask yourself that question, you don't need to ask any more questions about that. You know the answer. That's what I mean. There's, Hey, Bill, do you have any theories on why there's all the volatility in the SERPs? It's definitely above normal. And the data that Marty from SCM Rush, I was trying to get this started earlier. there's definitely market increases. Like we're talking over 50% increases in the volatility over the last year or two.
Volatility in terms of availability of products?
No, the way
Flux.
rankings are moving around so much, whereas before they were pretty, sustainable. Like I think for some people they're seeing a lot of volatility, other people not so much.
So do you think that's part of the, all these multiple updates that happen every
They're
week?
not updates, so I don't think they call them updates, Sarah.
Yeah, that's
I
why
don't
I'm
think
saying.
they're actually updates.
Quote,
If
quote.
Google's
Okay,
doing,
yeah, air
Google's
quotes.
doing
Okay.
50,000 tests a year, and they're actually doing 3,000 to 4,000 updates, which chances are they are. They're doing a lot of updates daily that we have
They just
no idea
aren't
about.
core updates, they're very small tweaks. Then that could also be a result of all the machine learning that's going into building these, right?
Yeah.
That's what I think
And
it is.
it's
machine learning.
not necessarily always just machine learning.
Right. Could be a few things. Like one thing, the reason I'm looking at it more closely or want to is I really believe that part of it has something to do with the patent that you wrote about back in July about the authors and uniqueness of content. Because when you hear the people whining, they're all the people who are probably out there just basically copying what everyone else has written about it already, if you know what I mean. And that's rampant in our trade. Rampant. I mean, how often do you see anything unique on SEO? Right?
Every time I write, but yeah.
Well, okay. I would say you're the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, you are
the
definitely
exception, Bill.
extremely unique.
That's why writers who are experts or have more expertise in a subject or have more knowledge of a subject, in my opinion, they're going to come out with better uniqueness to their content because they're adding their expertise in as well. For instance, I didn't know much about Office Space when I first started in that niche. By the end of it, I knew as much about it as the owner pretty well from, looking at what was being said, etc. in the industry. I looked at all that stuff and basically learned about that industry before I really started writing a lot about it. Doc actually did the first posts on that site, I believe.
To a degree, I think that's one of the skills necessary to be good in SEO. The ability to take lots of information and organize it in your head. Say these are things related to this particular niche.
Oh, right. That's the critical thinking again.
Yeah.
Or the lack thereof.
Or the lack thereof, yeah.
There are lots of writers who are really good at disinformation.
Disinformation, yes.
At disinformation, and being able to tell them lets you know whether or not if they're describing what they create as fiction, maybe they're Stephen King. If they're describing what they create as fact, maybe they're clickbait SEO artist.
Yeah.
Or tell them just go read Neil Patel and write like he
And they can make good money as a ghostwriter. Yeah.
I had to get that one in.
Thanks, Terry. Saved me the trouble.
No, I've been thinking about it a lot because I've noticed, and it's scaring a lot of people. If you're new to the industry, right?
Yeah.
You're not used to this much volatility and seeing your content get knocked all over the place. And I think that's, this is a new concept that no one's even talking about. That's why I want to try and study it a little, sit down with you and maybe we can figure out a way to identify how we can see the change that might be affected by this. And then go to someone like SEM Rush and say, here's the data that we're looking and this is what we're trying to ascertain.
Hmm.
That would be a great idea.
One of the early guys from SEM Rush, I don't think he's there anymore, Anton Shoki.
No, he went to Duda.
No, he's at
Oh,
Duda.
did he? Well, he was basically when Bill got sick there, he said, well, yeah, I can't wait for him to come back and do some videos for us. So he was working for SEM Rush there. I was thinking we could get data from them for sure.
Anton finished
video on their site, but that's
Anton finished 500 webinars for Sam Rush, and then moved over to Duda. Now he's doing the same for them.
He's doing the same for Duda, and he's doing really good.
What is Duda?
Duda, when he said where he was going, I had never heard of them, and I researched them. They're a platform, a bespoke CMS that, not really similar to WordPress, but to the extent that they're a CMS, but it's a proprietary thing, and it's dynamite. I tell you, we moved WebNarble over there, and have been playing with it, and we're really impressed. It is a nice system. They've got a tremendous engineering team. They put an awful lot of effort into it, and we're pleasantly surprised every day. So, but it's been around for years. They're based out of somewhere in Northern California, Palo Alto, I believe. They also have a huge office in Tel Aviv and several other offices around the world. But they've been around for.
It sounds like they have strengths in technology, but a need for marketing.
Yeah, I had never heard of them, Bill.
Yeah.
Not that me. I'm a WordPress junkie, so I wasn't looking for any alternative, as long as it wasn't Wix or something like that, But these guys, it's a drag and drop that puts all of the rest to shame, and it's sleek and it's fast, very resource light. It's like I say, we've been thoroughly impressed, Steve and I, at every step of the way, and their tech group is very supportive, right on top of their game. So
it's getting harder and harder to work in WordPress if you want to. For instance, I was trying to make a div that would put a border around something. It wouldn't do it. Literally would not. I couldn't figure out how to put a border because they don't have a way to do it other than if I wrote a CSS, wrote into the CSS that.
Yeah, but that takes some time.
Well, I want it in line anyhow because I may want to change that, right?
Yeah. I've been dreading the day that WordPress might suddenly not allow the use of the classic editor because I hate Gutenberg with a passion. And I think I found my alternative now,
Well, you're talking, I was asking for custom HTML too, and it was saying that it wasn't valid. So I even validated the code, and it was valid HTML. It wasn't valid for however the hell WordPress wanted you to do it.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was like after an hour, I just went and made a picture of the whole fucking It was easier than trying to write HTML. I could have wrote it in 10 minutes in HTML.
Well, we're past the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to bid everyone goodbye. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye all.
Thanks, everyone.
Wow.